Hi, I'm Shelley Wood and this is my tiny sewing room where I make doll clothes sewing videos. Today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable candy corn dress, which will fit Mattel's Francie, but it will also fit some other 11-inch dolls as well. There's a list on my website of dolls that fit in this free printable sewing pattern. So look on my website, shelleywood.com, for that list. Alright, before we begin, please do go to shelleywood.com to download and print this free printable PDF sewing pattern. Use the pattern to cut out all the shapes you see here. The skirt pattern will come in 2 lengths. I used the longer length for my candy corn printed fabric, which you can see here. So that's my longer length. It will come to about mid-calf on your 10 or 11-inch doll. And then the shorter pattern is used to cut out 3 layers of tulle. If you need to know more about tulle, you can just go to your fabric or craft store and you can buy it in large quantities or just some small crafting quantities. This is used for a petticoat under the dress. Now, instead of the candy corn fabric, depending on what time of year it is, any small print fabric will do for this dress. Okay, make a double fold hem along the length of the skirt by folding once and then a second time before you begin what we call the whip stitch. And that's how we're going to hem. So you fold the fabric once and then you fold it a second time, and then you begin your whip stitch. Now, if you need help with the whip stitch, there's a link to my whip stitch tutorial below this video on YouTube. But here's a quick overview of what a whip stitch looks like. You slip your needle under the fold and then through the fold. It's that simple. But my tutorial can make it even easier to see. Now, the long end of your fabric should be hemmed at this point. You can decorate a skirt's hemline in many ways, but what we're going to do for this dress, I'm using a 3/8 inch ribbon and a 1/8 inch rickrack. So measure your ribbon to match the skirt's longest edge and measure the rickrack to match the ribbon's length. Now, I hand stitched my rickrack onto the ribbon. I just enjoy hand stitching, but it can save time to use a sewing machine. If you're going to stitch it by hand, place your tiny stitches on top and bottom of each bend in the rickrack. So you want the wider stitch underneath. Now, when you've sewn the rickrack onto the ribbon, sew the ribbon onto the skirt's fabric. You want to be a little less than 1 centimeter above the edge of the hem. Set the skirt fabric aside for a moment and we're going to work with the bodice. That's the upper body part. Let's start by sewing the bodice's darts. So here's a close-up. Next, attach one of the backs to the front and you're going to sew along the shoulder. I'm using a back stitch for this. Do the same with the other back. Again, this is a back stitch and I have a tutorial for the back stitch too. Now it's time to gather the sleeve's base. This isn't the rounded end of the sleeve. Rather, it's a kind of a straight edge that's at the end of the sleeve where the cuff is going to be. Before knotting your gathers, compare it to the cuff's length. For my cuffs, I'm using bias tape. Bias tape comes in a package that looks like this, and I just showed you the 1/2 inch wide and the 1/4 inch wide. And this is a 1/2 inch bias tape, but you could use a smaller bias tape. It would still look pretty good. I actually started this project with 1/2 inch cuffs, but I changed my mind and decided I wanted 1/4 inch cuffs. Either size works fine, but 1/4 inch looks smaller. Here's candy corn dress. I'm using the pattern with double fold bias tape opened up. So I open the bias tape like this, and this is 1/2 inch. If I had decided to stick with the 1/2 inch, this is how I would have sewn my cuffs. So you want to make sure your gathers are clear down in the fold of the bias tape. Whether you're using the 1/4 inch or the 1/2 inch, you want to make sure those gathers are way down in there. And here we go. This is a whip stitch. So again, it's important to know how to do the whip stitch, and you can see me doing the whip stitch pretty quickly right here. Ooh, my fingernails look fancy. In this clip, you can see how wide 1/2 inch cuffs look at the bottom of a sleeve, so you can decide which size you want. So this is how they would look at the bottom of the sleeve in a 1/2 inch size. Okay, but I switched to a 1/4 inch bias tape and I liked it. Here's a clip of me sewing the 1/4 inch bias tape on so that you can get a feel for what the difference is. So it's a little harder to sew. If you're new to this kind of thing, you might want to go with the 1/2 inch. It still looks nice. It's just a little wider cuff. And you can see that the 1/4 inch is tiny. Either size bias tape will work just fine. The sleeves end up about the same length either way, especially if you push your gathers down into the fold. Okay, now let's attach our sleeves to the bodice. You're going to stitch from the underarm area toward the shoulder seam, attaching that sleeve. Stop just shy of the shoulder seam and then knot your thread right before you get to the seam. Do the same thing with the other underarm. So you sew from the underarm to the shoulder seam, stopping a little before you get to the shoulder. I'm just showing you what it looks like. So here's the bodice front and my fingers there on the right. Okay, and then the sleeve, and I'm at the underarm. You're going to knot the thread just shy of the shoulder again, so you want a little gap at the shoulder. So here I am stopping my seam before I get to the actual shoulder seam. If you have any extra fabric around the shoulder, and you should if you cut everything out correctly, you're going to use a new stitch to gather that fabric at the top of the sleeve. So here I am pulling the gathers so that the shoulder seam matches up with my sleeve. Now sew the gathered fabric to the shoulder seam area, and I'm using a backstitch. It will help to keep the seam really secure. Here's what your bodice looks like right now with just one sleeve attached. Okay, so we've got gathers at the top, and you can see there's the front of the bodice, and there's the shoulder, and it's nice and tight against the shoulder. There's no gap. Attach the other sleeve exactly the same way, and when you lay the bodice flat, it's going to look like this with both sleeves attached. Okay, you're going to fold one sleeve in half like you see in this clip. We're going to make sure that right sides are together. So that means the pretty side of the printed fabric touches the pretty side. Now stitch from cuff to underarm, and from underarm to the bodice's base like you see me doing here. Fold and stitch the other sleeve the exact same way. Again, keep those right sides together. Now invert the bodice. It helps to use a chopstick for this. They're just the right size for like an 11-inch doll. And you want to kind of twist it as you push it through the sleeve. The cuffs are going to be a little tricky. Just be gentle so you don't rip your seams. Now it's time to go back to working on the skirt. Gather all 3 tulle petticoats along with the skirt, but you want to keep your gather stitches very small because of the tulle. Make sure your petticoats are on the wrong side of fabric for the skirt. Now don't knot your gathers until you've measured the skirt against the bodice's base. You want to make sure they fit each other. Pin the base of the bodice to the skirt to make sure their lengths match up, just like this. And then once you've figured that, yep, my gathers match the bodice nicely, then you can tie a knot in your gathers. Okay, once you've knotted your gathers, sew the skirt's gathered waist to the base of the bodice. Again, I'm using backstitch for this, and it's starting to look more like a real dress now. Remember how we folded the bias tape over the sleeve's raw edge and then whip stitched it? We're going to do the same thing, but with ribbon at the neckline. Okay, and it's going to go around the collar of the dress. Just fold the ribbon, and then at the ribbon's edge you're going to create another fold and whip stitch down this fold, stopping about 2 centimeters from the waist. So you can see I'm whip stitching down, create this folded hemmed edge on both sides of the bodice, and then bring the skirt's raw edges together as you see me doing right here. So we're trying to find those raw edges and bring them together. Stitch from the hem up to create a closed base to the dress. Invert the skirt. Sew a few snaps up the back. If you need help with snaps, I do have a tutorial for that too. Sewing snaps on fabric. Just look in the description below this video on YouTube for the link to that tutorial. And now you're ready to try the dress on a doll. Oh, Francie looks so cute in this dress. I just love it on her. For more free printable sewing patterns to fit dolls of many shapes and all different sizes, remember to visit my website, shellywood.com. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy my videos and my free patterns, please share them on social media. It actually helps my website grow when you help spread the word.